David and his grandparents hardly ever talk about it, and I am still not sure of all the details. But I have pieced together some sort of history of the tragedy from Mrs. Owen and the other workers and tenants on the estate. It has left terrible scars on David's mind, for he has twice woken up in a panic in the middle of the night, and I have had to console him and tell him that all is well. All is certainly not well, and indeed I know not what demons of guilt and fear dwell within my dear husband's breast. I was reminded of this matter because today the weather broke, and Grandpa Isaac and David decided that they should burn the last of the charred timbers of the old house. After 2 years or more, they were dry as a black thorn bush in a desert. They have been standing for all this time in a jagged and ugly pile at the bottom of the yard, having been left there during the demolition of the ruined house. They wanted to burn them early in the summer, but dared not, for fear that sparks would set the common on fire. Billy and the other men lit the fire in the rain, and the blackened joists and rafters and purlins are now reduced to a pile of ash. But David could not watch. The old house was, they say, very grand, but old-fashioned, with small rooms and winding corridors and 2 narrow staircases. In the month of the fire, the Morgan family of 7 people were all living in the house, together with Mrs. Owen and 3 other servants downstairs at the back. David and his older brother Griffith were sleeping downstairs at the time, together with Grandpa Isaac and Grandma Jane. Father and Mother and the 3 younger children were sleeping upstairs. It happened in the month of April, shortly after Easter. Mrs. Owen told me they had all gone to bed early, for it was a windy night with heavy cloud, and the rushlights and candles kept on guttering and dripping with all the draughts. It was an easterly wind, a sort of wind hated by everybody in these parts because it is dry and cold and cuts through everything. She suspects that one of the older boys, possibly David, although I have not pressed him on this point, left a candle burning at the top of the stairs, having been to the upstairs office to fetch a book to read in bed. At any rate, she heard some shuffling and some footsteps on the stairs after she'd gone to bed. In the middle of the night, they were all asleep when Mrs. Owen was wakened by the dogs barking in the kennel and by Moses banging on her door. At once she smelt smoke, and when she got up to investigate, she was horrified to find that the centre of the house, around the main stairwell, was well alight. Moses was already dressed, but she rushed out wearing only her nightgown and shawl. Together they woke up the old people, and David and his brother, and they at once discovered that they could not get up the stairs because of the flames. The back staircase was also filled with black smoke and was impassable. They shouted and screamed warnings to those who were trapped upstairs. But there was no response. Frantically, they started to carry pails of water in from the pond, but their pathetic efforts had no effect on the flames. There was at that time no pipe carrying water down from the mountain spring. The upper story of the house was now full of smoke, and as the windows began to break, the east wind was fanning the flames and turning the house into a fiery furnace. still the would-be rescuers did not hear a sound from Master and Mistress Morgan or the small children. Perhaps they died peacefully from the effects of the smoke rather than from the terror of the flames. Let us hope so for their sakes. God rest their souls. By now, the smoke could be smelt at Dol Rannog, and the flames coming through the roof were visible against the skyline from down in the cwm. David and Griffith and the others worked like demented souls in hell, for they knew that there were 5 members of their family still upstairs. I am so horrified that I feel a tightening in my stomach as I try to imagine the situation more than 2 years after the event. Then the stairwell collapsed in a ball of fire, and they could still not get up the back stairs because of the swirling smoke. Both David and Griffith tried to crawl up the steps with wet sheets and blankets wrapped around them, but they could not breathe, and Grandpa had to rescue both of them before they threw away their own lives. One of the servants, named Eli Matthias, took a ladder, climbed up, and entered an upstairs window to try and rescue Master and Mistress Morgan, but he was engulfed by a great tongue of fire and smoke, and was terribly burned before he could be dragged clear by Grandpa. Then the neighbours from Dol Rannog, Penshrew and Blaen Wine started to arrive, and they made a sort of chain to carry water from the pond to the house, using pails, barrels, milk churns and anything else they could find. Thomas Tucker Penshrew took the long ladder to try and reach the window of the children's room, but it was so full of smoke that he dared not go inside. He shouted and shouted their names, Thomas, George and Rose, but all he heard in response was the fearsome roar of the flames. In the end, by all accounts, with the east wind encouraging the flames to even greater destruction, the house became such an inferno that nothing further could be done. The flames spread to the thatched roof of the barn, and that too was destroyed. Then the stable and cowshed caught fire, and 4 horses and 12 cows were killed. The neighbours and those who escaped from the flames had to stand well back and watch in their grief and horror as the flames completed their gruesome work, illuminating the darkest hour before dawn. David and Griffith and the grandparents and servants, all in a state of deep shock and utter exhaustion, were taken in by the neighbours from Dol Rannog and Penshrew. Dr. Havard from Newport turned up while it was still dark and treated the 2 boys who could hardly breathe on account of the smoke they'd inhaled. But he could do little for poor Eli Matthias, who died from the burns to his face and upper body. It was 2 days before the house cooled down enough for anybody to go inside and investigate. Most of the roof timbers and the upstairs floor timbers had gone, and only a few pieces of furniture from downstairs had been rescued. They never found the bodies of David's parents, or his brothers, or his little sister Rose, who was only 4 years old. But they were in there somewhere.